What do you think about bullying?
Uh, it's not nice
Why is it not nice?
because it's not.
So I'm Emma, and this year I've been studying for a Masters in Documentary Production whilst living in Brighton. During this time I've had my fair share of part-time jobs to make ends meet, and I've noticed that sometimes, when in the work setting, adults can be really quite mean to each other, abusing their power or the status of their roles to pick on others. I even saw a few people bullied out of their roles, but nobody said anything. It's almost as if, psychologically, we've never really left the school playground. And this got me thinking, is bullying as big of an issue in adulthood as it is in childhood? And if so, does protection and support fall away once we leave the school gates and enter the big wide world? Do we, as adults, just have to bear it? I wanted to see how bullying was actually defined, so I looked to an official website. Turns out there is no legal definition for bullying. They do, however, list bullying behaviours, which include spreading malicious rumours, unfair treatment, picking on someone, regularly undermining a competent worker, denying someone's training or promotion opportunities. I wanted to find out how much of an issue this really was, so I took to the internet. I found some worrying statistics, stating that workplace bullying is on the rise in the UK, and that nearly a third of people have experienced bullying at work. It was estimated that workplace bullying costs the UK economy $18 billion a year, and that it's been termed the silent epidemic because it simply isn't spoken of, with many organisations in denial about the issue. I found that there was an overwhelmingly positive amount of support for children, but not so much for adults. With bullying charities, I found many cut-off ages of 18, 20, and frequently 25. I wondered why this was. Psychologists now argue that the human brain is fully developed by the age of 25, so perhaps once you reach this point, you're expected to simply fend for yourself. So I could find out a little bit more about bullying and the negative effects it can really have on someone. I spoke to a psychologist, Melissa.
Well, obviously bullying is a very serious issue and the focus is a lot on children, but nowadays we're aware that bullying can actually cause trauma. So it's quite different from your regular banter between children. When a child is actually singled out and kept apart from the group and made to feel small, that can have long-term effects, increasing shyness, causing hyperventilation, anxiety, even depression.
Do you think it's likely that if someone was bullied when they were younger, that sort of pattern may carry through into their adult life?
I think that's very likely because it doesn't just cause internal issues. It also causes issues in social settings, like increased shyness. So they don't actually know how to distinguish normal interaction from maladaptive interaction.
So is it just vulnerable people that this can happen to?
Bullying can happen to anyone. What people usually forget about bullying is the personal aspect. A person in power, say manager or a boss, they have usually sort of an individual annoyance with the employee that they're bullying, and it can be definitely very serious for the people involved. It can be a group of colleagues bullying one colleague that they're singling out. But more often than not, it's actually a manager or a person in power. In the workplace, there's a lot of expectation of gaining that power. These days, we're all just individuals after power and the ultimate happiness. So that lusting for power can turn into something quite nasty.
This abuse of power seems to be very frequent in bullying cases, so I spoke to Caroline, who wanted to share her story of suffering firsthand from this abuse of power. Caroline wished to remain anonymous.
I was never aware of it at first. My manager that came in to the team was new, so at first she came across very friendly. She started to get to know us, so started to ask quite a few personal questions, which I thought was quite normal. Asked about kind of personal life, home life, relationships, which tended to go around the team. As the time went on, definite favouritism within the team. She kind of take the couple of the team away for some training days and not invite me. A couple of team meetings, they'd go into a room and not tell me that they were going to have a meeting for a long hour, so I'd be left sort of working on my own for a good couple of hours and then just come out and not update me with anything. She'd put me on projects and team events and still have something negative to say even after I'd done something good for the agency. She'd always have that negative feedback. On numerous occasions would ask if I had a boyfriend and whether that was an issue. So that in itself would make me think there was something wrong with me. She just didn't take a like to me and wanted to kind of make my life quite miserable. Started to question myself to the point where I would question whether it was myself, whether I was missing something, why I wasn't being included, whether it was I wasn't good enough for the team. My plan was always to resign. I think I got to the point after a year where I'd had enough. I felt defeated. I just thought the easiest option was to leave. Thankfully, I had one friend that I could confide in at the agency, and she was the one to push me to talk to the CEO, who was nothing but nice about it and instantly kind of made me realise that I should have done it a lot sooner. She was quite shocked that it had been going on for so long. Looking back, I'm really glad that I spoke up, because not only did it make me realise that it wasn't all in my head and that I did have a case, eventually it led to her dismissal. I'm sure my voice was heard. I then felt a bit stronger to then hand my notice in, but know that people were aware of what she was capable of and that no one would have to go through what I had with her.
So it seems that this is a problem that can thrive in silence for a long time before the person experiencing bullying speaks up, if at all. Why do people find it so difficult to speak up?
I feel like it's really mostly about society and what society is today. Because of technology, we're all just a number, you know, we're very easily replaceable. So people are afraid that if they speak up about bullying, say, if they're in a professional setting, then that they could lose their job, that somebody else would just easily replace them, or they'd just be shut down.
This fear of speaking out is part of what keeps the problem going. And obviously the statistics of how many people it actually affects are very hard to find, as most cases go unreported. With all of this in mind, I wondered what policies and procedures were actually in place to protect people who were experiencing bullying in the workplace. To find out more, I spoke to Amy Green, the HR manager of a large corporate firm.
We have a zero tolerance policy for bullying and harassment. However, it does rely on people raising issues. So obviously if we don't know that things are going on, we can't do anything about them. In HR, we support the business through various processes. So it could be dealt with informally, or if they feel that it hasn't resolved the issue, as an employee, they have a right to raise a complaint through the grievance procedure. This would involve an independent manager coming in and doing a kind of a thorough investigation, but it does rely on them having some evidence. Sometimes it can be very, very subtle. It's very difficult for the individual then to provide evidence of that unless there's something written or there's been a witness. It's often not clear cut, so that does cause issues in terms of people coming forward because they haven't got any evidence and they think that the other, once you raise the complaint, the other person's just going to say, it's not true. Working for a large company, we've got a lot of procedures and policies which are available to our employees. Smaller companies wouldn't have these policies and procedures necessarily, and if you're a kind of a freelance or a casual worker or on a 0 hours contract, you wouldn't be supported by these procedures.
So that seems like a pretty huge problem. Stepping aside from the issue of people not feeling that they can speak up, even if they have the support systems in place, you also have the issue of smaller companies not being protected by these policies or measures at all. What's more, even if these systems are in place, it doesn't mean they're infallible. I spoke to Sarah, who wanted to share her story as someone who suffered from this lack of support.
It took me a really long time to kind of understand or accept what was really happening, because I never really wanted to believe that I was somebody that could be discriminated against or treated unfairly. I worked with a manager and assistant manager who'd just been promoted after 10 years to an assistant manager. I got the feeling that she really needed to assert herself as an assistant manager. She loved it, every minute of it, the power of being in control. The first thing she did, which raised the alarms, was I was asked to submit a piece of work. I put a lot of effort into it because I knew it was going out for tender, and she submitted this piece of work in her name. I said, I feel really uncomfortable with the fact that you did that. And she said she wasn't aware that it was an issue. She would lie to management about my progress. She kind of sabotaged some of my work. Yeah, it was really, really difficult. I thought I was going crazy, like so many things had happened. I went to the CEO and his response was, "How dare you come here and talk to me? How disrespectful. How would she feel if she knew that you were sat here feeling this way about her?" And so this is the CEO. And that was... I just sat there in disbelief. My analogy was I felt like I was Frodo just walking into Mount Doom with no ring. I think I went home and I just cried.
Stress, anxiety, depression is one of the top 3 reasons for absence, for sickness absence. And quite often, in my experience, it links to bullying and harassment.
Both physical and mental illnesses can arise from this stress. Some of these illnesses can include depression, anxiety, migraines, indigestion, abdominal pain, asthma, fatigue and exhaustion. Bullying and harassment clearly cause a great deal of turmoil for the victim. I was curious as to what the difference between bullying and harassment actually was, according to HR, so I asked Amy to explain.
Offensive, intimidating, malicious or insulting behaviour, an abuse or misuse of power which undermines, humiliates or injures the recipient. The unwanted conduct affecting the dignity of men and women in the workplace. So it might be related to a protected characteristic such as sex, race, religion, sexual orientation, etc. So it could be a persistent or an isolated event in terms of harassment. It doesn't have to be a sustained behaviour.
When I researched this further, it turns out that bullying itself isn't actually illegal in the workplace, but harassment is. Harassment relating to a protected characteristic you have about yourself that someone violates. However, UK law now indicates that all state schools must have anti-bullying policies in place, adding to the idea that when we're adults, well, maybe we just have to bear it. It was only this year that raising a case was made affordable to many people, as earlier this year employment tribunal fees were ruled unlawful by the Supreme Court. Back in 2013, the government introduced fees of up to £1,200 for tribunal claims in order to cut the number of malicious and weak cases. This led to 79% fewer cases being raised over the following years. I found out that there are even contractual gagging clauses, which the victim of the bullying can be coerced into signing, which silences them from speaking out about what's happened to them, even to their significant other. It's worrying to think of how many people are affected by these issues each day. So is this human nature? Are we doomed to be corrupted when power, hierarchy or status comes into play? Daisha Keltner, a professor of psychology at the University of California, speaks of the power paradox, which states that positive social skills, including empathy for others, are seen as very important skills in leadership and in gaining power, but that once that person is awarded the power, their character and behaviour changes to be more ruthless and more stereotypically bullying. This is interesting when contemplating the force that power can have on an individual. A study published in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology states that people who are given a lot of power but without status are the most likely people to abuse that power over other people, with prison guards used as an example. The reasoning behind this is that exerting this power over others supposedly lessens their own negative feelings about their own low status. So does power without status corrupt? Do people abuse their positions? Dominic spoke to me about his experience in the prison setting.
You expect it to be a bit more disciplined and that you could approach someone in there if you had that kind of concerns, but really they're as worse as the inmates. They're not making the situation any better.
Is there a support system in place in prisons for people that are being bullied?
You know, they'd promote with the posters and say bullying's not right. Yeah, there's bullying campaign posters, but to me they all came across as bullies. You don't believe it's actually going on, you know. They're meant to be there to help, but they're not. They're like inciting it.
Do you think people abuse their power in the prison setting?
With the uniform gives them power to belittle you, to talk to you how they'd want to talk to you. You couldn't imagine for 1 minute them acting like they were acting in front of you with friends and close friends and families. Well, if they did, then that's quite an eye opener. You get bullies in all walks of life, whether it be in the playground, whether it be in business. It sort of like revolves. It shouldn't do. Obviously, you're an adult now. It's not a pretty thing. It's not a nice thing.
So she's trying to get to the play area and she just pushed me to get to the play area.
So it seems that this is an issue that never leaves us. with adults at times being just as vulnerable as children. The support is lacking, and this is an issue that's important we open up about, as it's a problem that thrives in silence. So what can people that are being bullied do about it?
I would advise anyone who thinks they're being bullied or knows they're being bullied to speak up. If it's safe to speak up, because no good will come from being silent. One thing that really helped with coming to terms with everything was logging it, because sometimes you don't realise that you're being manipulated until it's too late, or you don't realise how somebody's trying to shape your behaviour. You start to see patterns and you're less emotionally connected, and you think, oh, this happened this day, and this day. That's strange.
Trust your instincts. If you feel like something is wrong, if you feel like you're being spoken to in a disrespectful way, then definitely speak up a lot sooner. When you're in it, it's a lot harder to feel like you have a case and you're in the right to say something. So again, definitely confide in someone that you can trust, and that will allow you to speak through what you're going through, and then eventually you might feel like you're confident enough to tell someone. Never be afraid to question that what they're saying to you could be affecting you mentally and making you feel like you're a bad person, when really all you're doing is trying to help.
You've got to fight for yourself. You always keep fighting for yourself.
So is there hope for the future? A better way?
From the top, tackling obviously when it does erupt and things do go on, to tackle it. And you know, stamping it out really, and just trying to lead by example in a better way. You should just have a bit more dignity about it, and just think, would you like, you've got brothers, you've got sisters, would you like your mum or your brother, your sister to be treated like that? And I think really the answer to that is no, you wouldn't. So why would you inflict it on other people?
How can the future look brighter? Well, we need to develop a culture in which any victim feels comfortable to blow the whistle on a bully, because the atmosphere in which a victim feels confident to speak up is crucial. There are now employee assistance programs, EAPs, in place, which all employers should look to introduce, which are confidential, train staff in assertiveness skills, and can offer counselling to employees who've been bullied, as well as the bullies themselves, which should never be underestimated. Authors of the study from the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology say that we should find ways for all people, regardless of the status of their roles, to feel respected, valued and empowered, because feelings of respect alleviate negative feelings and therefore diminish the need for dominance or power over others. As a society, we should open up about the conditions that create bullies and victims, and realise that even if we aren't directly suffering at the hands of a bully, our friends, family or colleagues may be. We all need to recognise the capacity within ourselves to be both victim and bully, and seek to understand each other with compassion whilst never tolerating the bullying behaviours. And finally, we should recognise the fact that as adults, we have the potential to be just as vulnerable as we were as children.
Would you watch this film?
Yes.
Hey!